downloading Zoom. A lot of people are getting used to it. So, we wanted to just give people some time. Jazakallah khair for being here with us today. Let's dive right in. I'll tell you a bit about the I3 Institute, and we'll introduce our speakers, and then inshallah we'll dive right into our event. I3 Institute is an educational and transformational institute. Our aim is to empower Muslims with both basic and in-depth understanding of Islam to become the principal leaders of tomorrow. We welcome you to the second event of this series that we're hosting. This event's called the Hot Topic Series, open forum to address your burning questions. We have a lot of Q&As in line. The main questions for this event are, is Sharia law barbaric? Islam versus secularism, which is more just? We will have our speakers for the night delve deep into the topics, answering all the questions you've got, the ones you've submitted before, and the ones that you'll have the chance to submit here right now. So inshallah, with that, I'm very excited for what's to come. Let's just start right with our first speaker, Sheikh Usta. Sheikh Usta is the founder of the I3 Institute and the CEO of I3 Institute. He's been teaching Islamic knowledge for over a decade now, alhamdulillah. He's currently completing his master's in Islamic Sharia and holds a bachelor's degree in Arabic and Islamic studies. He's learned from, alhamdulillah, 11 prominent scholars, including Dr. Abdul Fattah Idris, leading comparative fiqh professor at Al-Azhar. He's, of course, the founder of I3 Institute. And inshallah, Sheikh Usta will speak briefly first on Sharia, followed by Brother Asadullah Andalusi. Sheikh Fattah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Islam is a deen, and the word deen in Arabic means a way of life. It doesn't mean a religion as a word as defined in the English language. It actually means more of an ideology, a way of life, a paradigm. These words are a little bit more closely, at least, related to the word deen in Arabic than the word religion. When we talk about secularism, the word came from Europe, and really kind of the main tenet of secularism is to separate religion from state, from government, and from public affairs, really. And the reason is because Christianity, which had only a spiritual creed in a spiritual system, filled the gaps of how to manage life through the popes and the Christian priests' dictations. And these were basically mere individuals' hunches. And what ended up happening, unfortunately, is lots of injustice, because whenever the human being takes over the role of God, which is basically setting and defining how life should be lived. I'm saying it one more time. Whenever the human being takes over the role of God, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is really setting the way and the method and the approach of how to live life, that approach really causes the human being to suffer and to live in pain for decades and centuries, unfortunately. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran really encapsulates this meaning in the ayah that says in the Quran, وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكًا. Whoever basically turns away from my guidance, from my blueprint of how to live life for the human being and jinn on this planet, that person and that society and that nation and that people will live a life full of misery, pain and suffering and agitation and anxiety. So when somebody comes and tells me basically the rate of anxiety within society is increasing, I mean it's something that Quran talks about. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about it in His holy book. So what happened is basically the Europeans decided to say, hold on one second, we're sick and tired of religions, and they lumped everything basically under the label of religion, and wanted to really they waged a crusade against religion, and that's where secularism came about. Islam, on the other hand, was behind the golden age of the people of Andalus, the European area of the Iberian Peninsula, the Andalus, which Brother Abdullah is really from. That's why his last name is Andalusi, because he comes from that area. Islam also was responsible for a human and global civilizational progress in all areas of life: the intellectual, the social sciences, the physical sciences, the natural sciences, technology and arts and scientific discovery and education and removal of poverty and removal of oppression. Islam was behind that. What is Islam? Well, it's really the blueprint that God have sent subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to humanity, that defines and that specifies how life should be lived. How life should be lived. And the minute the human being basically tries to deviate away from that method, from that approach, from that guidance, unfortunately, that society or that human being or that individual or that nation will again suffer. Now, the Quran and the Sunnah are complete, meaning basically every aspect of life, every question of life, every issue of human concern, every dispute on any policy for human life and human living, anything, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has an answer for in the Quran and the Sunnah. And again, that's basically by the dictation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by the revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, where He said in Surah Al-Ma'idah, اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت لكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. So today I have completed this way of life of yours. I've perfected my blessings upon you, and I am pleased with Islam being your way of life, your standard of living, your lifestyle. So Islam answers every aspect of human affairs. So how are we going to basically structure societies? How's inheritance going to work? What's the relationship between the parents and the children? What's the relationship between the wife and the husband? What's the relationship between the neighbors? What's the relationship between people who get married? All these issues, basically Islam sets a specific framework. How are we going to buy and sell? How are we going to basically allow people to rent property, to invest and create businesses? How to trade on the international stage and ship products? How are we going to consume products? How are we going to distribute the wealth in society? All these issues are issues that Islam gives a detailed solution for. How are we gonna elect our leaders? What is the powers that our leaders are supposed to have? What is the rights and responsibilities of citizens? All these other questions, basically within the political sphere, Islam basically sets a detailed blueprint of how to live it, and that's the political system aspect of Islam. And every other aspect, from the spiritual to the individual hygiene to the clothing and food stuff, to every aspect of human life, is documented and encoded in the Quran and Sunnah, and the scholars have extracted those and encoded them in a more a layman readable or student knowledge readable way, because not every single Muslim has the ability to go and delve into the Quran and Sunnah and extract the ahkam on their own. It takes a very high caliber of a scholar, a mujtahid, to be able to do that. And they documented all that, again, for the laymen and the students of knowledge in the books of fiqh, which includes a chapter on every single domain of life. So that's kind of basically the little introduction I'm going to give. And we'll be waiting, inshallah, for your questions and your concerns, anything that puzzles your mind about Islam and the Sharia, anything that basically occurs to you. Inshallah, today we will try our best to answer it. And if we can't, we will, inshallah, reach out to those who could and bring the answer back to you, inshallah. May Allah bless you. Barakallahu feekum. Jazakumullah khair. And I'll stop right here.
Barakallahu feek, Sheikh Usta, Jazakallah khair, for the beautiful talk. Next, inshallah, we'll go ahead and introduce Brother Asadullah. Brother Asadullah Andalusi, he holds a degree in both Western and Islamic philosophy, master's in library and information science. He specializes in topics related to philosophy of science, atheism, terrorism, Islamic ethics, and then other issues really facing the Muslim community globally. He's active on the online community, spreading the message of Islam and clarifying misconceptions. He'll also speak to you about one of his channels and groups, pages where he's doing a lot of good work. With that said, I'd like to invite Brother Asadullah. Bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah. Given the fact that this is a Q&A, I was not expecting to give an introduction. So that said, just a few quick words. First, I'd like to thank I3 Institute for inviting me here, allowing me to participate in this conference. It's an honor. Inshallah, I hope that I can do some good with what limited knowledge that I have. So thank you to the host, especially to Sheikh Usta for having me here. That said, I believe that many of the issues that we'll be discussing in this Q&A session are quite important, in that we probably live in one of the most confusing times in Islamic history. Unbeknownst to many Muslims who, especially young Muslims who I think don't really appreciate the period of time they're living in, we are actually living in a period of time where many of our circumstances, our situations are quite unique to this ummah. We're living in a time period in which information is now global, communication is now global, to such an extent where we are overwhelmed with data. And we live in societies that are not governed by religious principles, or necessarily or explicitly so. And as Muslims, especially living as minorities in Western countries or elsewhere, we are trying to not only connect with our faith and our identities and our principles, but we're trying to do so in an alien land, in a situation and circumstance that is completely alien to us, or at least opposite of what we believe or how we wish to live our lives. As a result of that, this causes a lot of cognitive dissonance. It causes a lot of confusion. It causes a lot of doubts to arise in the minds of many young Muslims and even older Muslims. And as a result, we have to now address those doubts and those confusions through Q&A sessions like these, or even developing institutes such as I3 and others around the world. And alhamdulillah for institutes like I3 and Sapiens Institute and Yaqeen and others who are attempting to present an academic understanding of the faith, especially during these very complex and confusing times. Because I truly believe that the main issue behind much of the confusion, the main factor behind much of the confusion and doubts that many Muslims are facing today is as a result of a lack of proper Islamic education. Unfortunately. And I think that's most obvious, especially in minority communities here in the West, either in Canada or the United States. Now, that said, although I do believe that there are going to be a number of things that we agree upon, me and Sheikh Usta and others, with respect to how do we address these issues, I do believe as well that there may be some differences in the sense of where we're located. So I know many of you are coming from Canada, and the United States, even though those are some cultural similarities there are also a lot of variances in terms of law and other such things, and geography, that I think that we could also go over. So if I give an answer that seems maybe slightly different, just know that I'm coming from maybe a slightly different context. And inshallah, perhaps we can clarify those issues or those variances later as well. So I don't have much else to say in that respect. But once again, thank you for having me, and I'll do my best to answer any of your questions. And please forgive me beforehand if my questions are not considered adequate. I always refer back to Sheikh Usta for his scholarly knowledge. So, Jazakallahu khairan.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Asadullah. I really appreciate that. With that said, guys, inshallah, we will dive right into the questions. So what we'll do is let's do a few documented questions which you guys have submitted before. So we will alternate. We'll take one question there, and I will also alternate between our respected speakers. So with that said, I encourage you guys to type up any questions you have. If you guys are new to Zoom, go at the bottom where it says Q&A. Make sure to type that. Type any of your questions you have. I'm keeping an eye here, so inshallah, I'll be calling you guys out as your questions come in. With that said, Sheikh, should we start with the first question? So, Bismillah. So first question, this I have for Sheikh Usta. Was Islam spread by sword? And a related question close to it is, under Sharia law, would everyone have to convert to Islam?
I was just telling Asad a couple of days ago, this is my favorite question. May Allah bless you. Very great question, to be honest. And I really am going to give you guys, inshallah, an answer that I don't believe is used as much, if any, to be honest. I've never heard it myself. So, but for me, from a fiqh perspective, because I come from a fiqh perspective, not just an intellectual perspective, I tied things together. This claim of spreading Islam by the sword, you need to understand, is Eurocentric, Judeo-Christian centric, because they spread Christianity by the sword. I mean, Africa was a Muslim continent, fully almost. Yeah, I don't want to basically claim fully almost or not, but like a large size of Africa was Muslim. And today there's lots of Christian community. Where did they come from? They came basically through literally the iron fist of the Europeans. So slave trade was one thing they did in the transatlantic slave trade, but also basically they colonized Africa and forced people to be Christian until today. People, evangelicals go to countries all over the world, not just Africa. I'm just giving Africa as one example, by the way. They give food for the Bible, and it's a fact at the end of the day. Now, that being said, the Crusades happened, where basically war was waged to force people to be Christian. That's one of the targets and objectives of the crusade. Unfortunately that's how the things are thought about. Jesus was quoted in the Bible. They say that we need to use the sword to make sure people believe. So anyway, aside from all that, I'm just saying this is a Eurocentric accusation to Islam. And I'd like to make another claim. I want people to hear this, and I want this to be clear and loud, that you can't believe that a single person in the history of Islam was converted by the sword. You not even a single individual. This is a pure lie. And the reason is, in Islam we have it clear in the Quran, in the one and only manuscript that we claim to be the word of God, that if a person is if a person claims to be a believer, but inside that person, whether a male or a female, they're not believers. They don't believe. We call that person a munafiq, a hypocrite, and therefore cannot be a Muslim. A hypocrite is a person who is Muslim undercover, basically. So when you force a person to believe, you're just making them, lie in an outward fashion, and to kind of keep their disbelief inside them. So that's hypocrisy. So from my perspective, there's definitely basically the Sharia 100% does not in any way or shape force people to convert. Actually, it is in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. Whoever wants freely can choose to believe, and whoever wants to choose to stay on their disbelief can choose to stay on their disbelief. So the question of faith, word faith, basically put it please in a bracket, because again, I don't believe there's faith in Islam, but the question of belief and attaining and being convinced of having conviction in the doctrine of Islam, which is the way to really be a Muslim, is something that must be freely done by the human being. Any type of forcefulness will render that person as a liar, a person who is not really a Muslim. In the same legal system within the Islamic judiciary, if a person is forced, for example, to sell their mobile phone to somebody else, that contractual agreement between those two parties is invalid, is actually void. It's as if the Islamic judiciary says as if this contract did not happen. The phone is still basically for the original owner, and the money belongs to the one who forced the sale, or the one, maybe that person's forced, by the way, to give the money to the purchaser. So it's a basic fact in Islamic judiciary and Islamic law, which is Sharia, that any human being that is forced under any form of duress, that the verbal agreements, which we call contracts from a legal perspective, are void and nullified, and as if they didn't happen. So the minute you claim that people are forced to be Muslim by the sword, that claim of Islam we as Muslims disregard as void. So it's a ludicrous and an empty statement from the Orientalists that again, they're trying to attack Islam and slander the religion. And it is something that basically they themselves, unfortunately, adopt as a method to spread their Christianity, because it did start from a Eurocentric perspective. So definitely, the Sharia disallows that in all forms, and we don't accept people who are forced to be Muslim. We don't consider them Muslim in the first place. So if there is any type of forcing, well, it's not really to Islam. It's definitely not to Islam.
Brother Asadullah, would you like to comment on that?
Yes. So yes, I concur with Sheikh Usta's point. And I think that it's obviously theologically and legally sound. Another way to look at it as well, though, is also from a historical perspective, and also utilizing the principles of especially many people in the West today, and even among Christian and Jewish communities. So a lot of people don't realize this, but when somebody brings up this whole thing about, well, Islam spread by the sword, it's not simply just about conversions, but also about a lot of Westerners have this problem with aggressive warfare. Unfortunately, those who come from this perspective tend to have a very limited knowledge of history and historical context. And that's something I kind of want to bring to the table here. A lot of people don't understand is that especially when Islam it's not just a religion that gave these, that just gave divine orders, but it also can adapt to certain situations and circumstances. A lot of people don't realize is that when Islam came into existence as we know it today, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the companions, and actually the entire world, grew up during an age of empires. And a lot of people don't really comprehend this point, but what that means is that every single polity, every single state actor in the world, their only means to power and resources was to conquer everyone else around them. Now, if we're to understand the context of that, if the Muslims were to have remained pacifist, or to have simply taken a defensive stance on every single situation, or that might have possibly caused the non-existence of the Muslim community as we during that time. In other words, let me put it this way: if the Muslims did not conquer or attack Byzantine and Persia, the Sassanid Empire, they would have conquered the Arabs eventually anyway. They would have come in, and we have even during early Islamic history, we know of times where the Byzantines, for example, had encroached upon Arab territory and were attempting to cause problems and things like this. So this whole idea of, oh, we're against aggressive warfare, yet all of civilization, I think, prior to the last 150 years was basically built on this. And that's not to say necessarily that that Muslims were simply copying. It's just that that was the only way for us to even exist in that circumstance. Like if you don't attack your enemies, they're going to attack you. That's basically what's going to happen. Except, of course, under treaties and such, we were actually very rare back then and very easily broken. And today, of course, we've stopped doing that because we also abide by our contract with the states. We have peace treaties, right? So, and other states are all neutral, and they're not. Most countries in the world aren't attempting to conquer the Muslim land. So we have a sort of a spoken and written agreements with them that we're not going to fight each other. So we abide by our contracts, and that's the reason why we're no longer engaged in that sort of warfare. But we have to remember very, very clearly, I mean, many of you in here are very young, and myself included, but there are still people who are living today who lived through World War I and World War II. Okay, I know that seems like crazy to some of you, but those wars were only like less than a century ago. All right, and empires still existed back then, and had not certain powers fought against these empires, they would have destroyed everything. And I'm talking about Nazi Germany and Japan, etc. So, so this is a very normative, practice in history that if the Muslims did not attempt to engage with, would have been essentially conquered themselves. So alhamdulillah that we did have the initial that we did conquer Byzantine, alhamdulillah that we did conquer the Persians, alhamdulillah that we conquered everyone else, because had Islam not come to eradicate those extremely aggressive systems through its own, what I call just aggression, and then we would have been destroyed, and many people would have been oppressed as a result of that. And this is also comes with a distinction here as well. This sort of conquering that Muslims did in the beginning was not the same as what the Byzantines and the Persians did. When they conquered people, they converted them. They said, you have to be Christian, you have to be this, you have to be that. And one of the reasons that the Muslims had such an easy time governing many of the provinces that they eventually did conquer was because they allowed people the freedom to believe what they wanted to. They just imposed a very small tax, and that was it, and they moved on. But the Christians, especially, and as Sheikh Usta mentioned in the Crusades, they were adamant even about converting other Christians. In fact, when the Crusades began, this is something that maybe people don't know, the Catholics, the first thing that they did, the Western Christians, was they actually destroyed many Eastern Orthodox churches. They sacked many Eastern Orthodox churches. They killed other Christians. They slaughtered them if they did not convert to Catholicism. This is before they moved on to the Muslims. So even if you look at history, our practices were so different compared to theirs. So when people bring this up, well, Muslims, in your law you have, or you can fight other people and aggress other nations. Well, you have to understand what was going on back then as well. I mean, what did you want people to do? You want us to sit around and just wait for them to come up and kill us? I mean, that's not going to happen, right? So even just from a simple historical perspective, our understanding of warfare and even our understanding of aggression is completely different from how Christian and Western imperialism has conducted itself over the past few centuries. So this is something that really people need to be cognizant of.
Perfect. Jazakallah khair for that,
I
brother.
have one more point, inshallah. I guess in addition to what Brother Asadullah said a little bit, actually. So I think basically partly people ask this question for a different reason, because historians have always been mesmerized with how fast Islam spread, especially in the first century, and so all these masses who became Muslim all over North Africa, the Middle East, and the Mesopotamia, in Central Asia, up to China, really, Islam spread, in a lightning speed, from the borders of France, literally inside France to inside China, within decades. All right. So if this is the question, there's a different answer for it, right? So how did basically they converted all these people? They must have forced them by the sword. Again, maybe just to add a couple points to what Brother Abdullah said, you should look into the Fourth Crusade, by the way. In the 1204 is the siege of Constantinople by the Catholics. They destroyed Constantinople, raped every woman there. Christians raping Christians. The army that came, the Fourth Crusade, actually was not to the Muslim lands, was supposed to, but it's changed its direction to Constantinople, raided it, smashed it, burnt it, raped every woman there, Christian on Christian aggression. But that's how things work. But just a little kind of aside from just an added point to Brother Abdullah. Going back to the third point, so which is if Islam didn't use force, what did they do? How did they spread and made all these half of the world Muslim at that time, half of the known world really? And the answer is something we need to spread today. The answer is something we need to talk every day about, is that Islam spread justice. We didn't go basically to grab resources. We didn't go to basically burn places. We didn't go to basically, humiliate people and colonize them. We didn't go, no. We went there to build universities and schools and to better the economy and to free the slaves and to free human beings from the slavery of the rich and the oppression of the human laws and the man-made laws. We went there to spread the light of Islam, to spread civilization, to teach people sciences and advancements in technologies and the arts. We went there to basically lift off the taxes that killed the human sense within a human being. I mean, today, basically, we're living in countries that, here in Canada, some of us pay half of their income tax. Add to that another almost 15% of sales tax. Add to the property tax. Add to the insurance liabilities. Brothers and sisters, the human being is crushed. The human being is crushed today and is crushed back then. So when the light of Islam basically spread and people were freed, really freed, to live and to have an honorable life, to have a life that really, people talk about the American dream. The people don't understand what the American dream is all about. The American dream is the American nightmare. The real dream for the human beings is Islam, but people don't know because we don't have the machine, the media machine to spread it. And that's where you guys come. We're speaking to what is this? This is an MSA event, isn't it? We're speaking to you, the youngsters. You guys are supposed to basically carry this deen and clarify it to the masses. Islam came and created just economy. Ali bin Abi Talib was the one who said that if poverty was a human being, we would have we would execute that person. We would take and get rid of poverty. We would distribute wealth. We wouldn't have basically trillionaires and trillionaires and half of the world today. There's 800 million people who don't have clean water. People drink water as filthy with worms and all types of diseases. That's 1 out of every 10 human being. 8 billion, you have 800 million people. We have half of the planet, 4 billion people living off of $2 a day. 80% of this planet lives under $10 a day. This is the oppression that we're having. But see, if you don't feel the pain of others, if you have zero empathy, if you're narcissistic, if you're a person that basically is so selfish because you were born and raised in an individualized, individualistic, secular, materialistic, consumerist, self-loving, culture, well, you're going to be asked. You're going to be asked. The reason people converted en masse is because of the justice of Islam and the mercy of Islam and the mercy of the system that really made this world almost like a little Jannah on this planet. And this is what Islam is supposed to do: remove oppression and bring justice. So this is maybe another perspective added to my first answer and Brother Asad's answer also. There are 3 perspectives we gave here basically. So I hope basically this question is really answered, inshallah. Maybe if Asad wants to add a 4th perspective, maybe.
I thank you so much, Sheikh. I'm actually don't want to add too much to that final point, but perhaps I do want to kind of clarify that we should be discussing conditions more than actual legalities or even actions. We should be discussing consequences and conditions of things. So, for example, you brought up Sheikh Usta brought up the whole point about individualistic societies. In the United States, even though we are considered one of the richest countries in the world, we have some of the largest homeless population, where people literally cannot find food in a society that produces more food than any other nation on this earth. If you go to downtown Chicago, for example, at dead of night, you'll find blocks of people, miles long, kilometers long, of people huddled together on the street, struggling to find food in garbage cans, okay, who don't have any health care. I mean, wallahi, these people live worse than people who were captured in warfare in the Islamic State, centuries ago. Okay, it's a horrible condition. So we need to really be cognizant of conditions and circumstances more than what something is in the law or what actions are taking place or what even the system itself is. Because if we see the conditions, then we'll understand there's something flawed about the system, right? That said, I also want to say this really quick here as well, that I think there's a mentality, especially among the youth, not just Muslims, but everyone in general, that complex answers or nuanced answers equate to somehow being flawed or wrong. And I want to address that prior to getting further into this Q&A, because I think a lot of people have this misconception that somehow this is like apologetics, or we're just making excuses or something. And I know that's the sort of mentality that many youth have today. So I want to be very clear here that not everything is black and white, and not everything requires a yes or no answer. And in fact, if that's what you're expecting, then to be frank, I think that you are doing a disservice to your own intellect and also to the tradition of knowledge that Islam has brought about. And even just in general, knowledge in general. Many complex issues, especially when they come with loaded assumptions, require a lot of time to discuss, especially when people don't understand what's actually going on. Like, for example, we may discuss the notion of slavery in a moment, and that's what I'm sort of prepping for here as well, is that, people understand that word very differently. People understand the conditions of that word very differently. People understand the history behind that word very differently. And unless you unpack all of that, none of you are going to comprehend the subject matter, at least from the Islamic perspective, to any great degree. So please be patient. Please understand that the things that we're talking about, we're not just waffling. This is actual information. This is actual knowledge that we're trying to give you about these subjects to clarify any issues that you have. And I just want to sort of prep. I should have said this in the beginning, but it just came to my mind. So thank you very much.
Jazakallah khair, brothers. Appreciate that. So we did have another question here, Brother Asadullah. It seems like on the list here also, we also have the slavery question. You want to go ahead with the slavery question?
I would prefer if Sheikh Usta took that first, and then I can add to it. So,
okay. So this question that we have is, let's take one that we have live that came in from here, is how practically Islamic law will be implemented in present situations.
I'm sorry, is this for Asadullah or for myself?
We have this. Asadullah, would you like to go first on that?
I have Sheikh Usta
right,
to
charge on these, and then I will come in.
Sounds good.
Awesome. So there's two ways to answer this question, really. Well, it's not two ways. There's two point of views or contexts. The religious one. So if you are a Muslim and you're asking me this question, I tell you, if you believe in the Quran, if you believe that that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent this final message to humanity, then definitely this message has to be relevant, practical, and viable till the day of judgment. So definitely, like this should be a no-brainer, right? Like anybody who doubts that Islam is actually relevant, practical, viable for life is actually non-Muslim, right? Like that person doesn't believe. But definitely people need to learn. So when we're asking to learn, that's a different story. I'm saying basically when people reject that. The second piece is basically if let's say a non-Muslim tells you, look, you're presenting this deen of yours, and you tell me this is the best thing out there, and it's going to cause mercy and progress and civilization. How's that going to happen? Well, then we need to understand what is the implication. What is it that that person first understands of Islam, and what is that person does not understand of Islam? The way I would start is to explain that Islam is not a religion from a Western perspective. Religion to a Westerner, even if you pull up the dictionary, it's really more of like a metaphysical, personal, spiritual, a set of beliefs. It has nothing to do with basically how to run a government, how to run a state, how to structure society, how do you structure economy, how do you structure international trade. Now, Islam deals with all these questions. Deals with every single question that I just mentioned. Deals with taxes, taxation. Who do we tax? Who do we not tax? How much do we tax? What things gets taxed? For example, I'll give you one example so I can give you a little kind of things that are more concrete. In the Western system, in the liberal system, it's a capitalist economics. That's why we call it the capitalist world, or capitalist world versus the communist world, right? The capitalist world is a world that sanctifies capital and secures capital and safeguards capital and the ownership of capital and the freedom to basically own it and transfer it and utilize it and so forth. So unfortunately, the way that the taxation is structured upon people, as I just said earlier, is heavy taxes that ends up, unfortunately, mostly on the middle class, with the lower class, and maybe just the beginning of the upper class. The very rich, the millionaires, have the tools that are, because of their wealth, have the tools to navigate the system, so they end up paying almost no taxes. So when Biden in the presidential election came about and accused Trump that he didn't pay much taxes except maybe $750 or whatever, out of millions and millions, this is real. This is real. We need to understand it's real. Okay. So if Trump really had the guts, he would have said, "Here we go. This is it. I pay taxes all the time." No, and it's not only Trump; it's all the millionaires. The minute you get to a millionaire stage, the minute you basically leave employment or you become a capital owner, the capital gains and the taxes that are structured for capital gains, which are the people who are super rich. There's many loopholes in the system. Not loopholes. The law is structured in a way where basically these people will pay less taxes, on the claim by economists that this will encourage these people who are entrepreneurs and capital owners to hire employees and hire the population. So they give them a tax break so they can actually hire the masses and keep society, in shape. Because see, what is capitalism, brothers and sisters? Let's speak ideology. Let's speak intellectualism. Capitalism, in the simplest sense, is every human being on their own. So if everybody's set on their own, and the government's supposed to just basically sit there and just make sure that basic liberties are not encroached, well, how if a person does not know how to live and end up basically being homeless and dying on the streets, like happens in the streets of Toronto every single winter, well, that's not the government's fault. That's not the rich's fault. That's the person's fault. In such a situation, when basically there's people with the capital able to actually create businesses and employ people, and there's people who basically don't have the ability to actually create food for themselves. The government is this republic, this Western liberal capitalist system is structured in a way where the government is going to give the huge tax rates for the millionaires, so they just keep giving some bread to the rest of the population. Now in Islam we say, hold on. This whole description is messed up. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, and he knows the best formula. This whole flash, this whole mirage of that everybody's free to do whatever they want, is the biggest lie in the human history. The biggest lie in human history is the lie of the Western capitalist to the human, that they're free, but they're really mere slaves in reality. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the human being and knows what is the right recipe for an honorable, happy, and beautiful life. Yeah? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, hold on one second. You can't own whatever you want. That's rule number one. You can own what I tell you can own. So from day one, from the get-go, Allah says, hold on. You can't just own whatever you want. You can't own, for example, something that basically is if you speak to a capitalist or Westerner or non-Muslim, it's like, what are you talking about? What do you mean you can't own? You can't own oil, for example. You can't own an oil well. You can't own a road, a highway. There's lots of highways basically where they're literally companies. It's private highways. They charge you a little kind of a charge, a toll when you're using it. Roads cannot be owned. Water wells cannot be owned. Rivers cannot be owned. Grazing land cannot be owned. TV and radio signals cannot be owned. Internet cable connections cannot be owned. Telephone cabling cannot be owned by anybody except by the state on behalf of the public. Gold, silver, minerals, sulfur, salt, any type of natural resources, oil, natural gas, all this stuff, no individual can own it. It's a public property. Now this is you need to understand. I cannot call it genius because subhanAllah, this is divine. This is divine. The wisdom behind it is to basically put a caliber. Because the minute basically you let the strong beat the weak, it's a jungle. That's what we have. We're living in a jungle. From an economic perspective, it's a jungle. So the way Islam structures economics is, first of all, says, okay, hold on. So I know you're greedy. I created you. You want to own everything, but no, hold on. There's red lines. There's something called private property. You can own books, you can own cars, you can own houses, but you can't own the other stuff, which we call public property. Number two, it doesn't make sense. For example, today I was thinking, subhanAllah, I'm an MBA graduate. I studied economics at advanced level. And when you're putting sales tax, that's the worst idea ever. Why would you put a sales tax? What does sales tax do? Tell me. Anybody wants to kind of guess? What does a sales tax do? There's one nice little outcome for sales tax, right? It's basically halting the economic cycle. Literally, it's just friction. If people, I'm a software engineer with a computer engineering background and electrical, so it's like a resistor. It's putting resistance against the economic cycle. If you're gonna buy something, and it's, let's say, $1,000, yeah, the minute it becomes basically $1,200 because of sales tax, you're gonna say, hold on, I can't buy that much. I'm gonna buy a little bit less because I only have this much funds. Taxes halts the economic progress of a society. Sales tax specifically. I'm talking about only sales tax here, or they call it VAT in some countries and so forth. Yeah. Why would you put a sales tax in an economy? Let the economy basically run. Let people buy and sell. For example, here in Canada, if you buy a car, you have to buy, excuse me, you have to pay sales tax on a car. So when a car is like, let's say $20,000, you're gonna pay $3,000-$4,000 extra. I'm like, oh my gosh, that breaks people. Every time you need to buy and sell, you have to basically pay that tax. What does that do? That makes people basically, I don't want to buy and sell anymore. I'm just gonna keep my stuff. What happens to the economy? Less buying and selling. And that basically kind of halts the economic cycle and halts the manufacturing of the goods and services in the economy, and puts a cap. Puts a cap. In Islam, we say, hold on a second, there's no sales tax. That's oppressive. Number two, when you put a sales tax, who gets hurt the most? The poor, because they're the one who basically are buying their basic needs, and there's a tax on the basic needs. A poor person spends, let's say, $10,000 mostly upon their basic necessities. They get a hard hit on that because the sales tax and everything. A rich person, when they get their basic necessities are still $10,000, but they have millions. That tax is nothing. So it's harming the poor and the middle class, and it's halting the economic cycle of any economy from progression and from actually producing more, so more people basically can have access to more wealth. And see, that's just sales tax. Income tax, you're destroying the whole economy. And imagine you have the other half of your income. What would you do? Oh my gosh, people will be happy. People will be buying stuff. People will be producing more stuff. Small businesses will flourish. Yeah. No, I can talk forever today on economics and politics and social systems, but that's why you need to learn, right? We can talk about billion issues, but just chose one thing, which is tax, because people get hurt by it. There's people who are living on the streets; they can't even afford to pay rent. I mean, today, basically, if you're in the GTA, talking about rent is crazy. Yesterday, I went to see a little apartment for my parents, 3-bedroom apartment, $2,600. I'm like, there's people who make $1,500 for as monthly income. Yes, this is just a 3-bedroom apartment. I saw a 2-bedroom apartment, natural, good price for it. It's not too expensive, $2,200. There's people who can't even make $2,000 a month, and that's just rent. So what are you doing? You're crushing the masses. You're crushing humanity. In Islam, we say, hold on 1 second. We're gonna tax the assets. It is unjust to tax the income. It is unjust to tax the sales. It is unjust to tax basically properties that you own, like your own household, that you use a basic necessity in your own cars. It is haram. It is haram to tax any of this stuff, by the way. Islam is haram. It is super unjust. That's why people basically are suffering today. What is Islam tax? Islam tax assets. Assets. Okay? Assets, especially liquid assets, special liquid assets. I don't want to get into the fiqh of it. There's lots of details, but again, if people want to dig into it, no problem, inshallah. But the rich who have millions of dollars of inventories and businesses and investments, this is where basically we take 2.5 of that and we transfer that back to the poor, so we can have what people are discussing today in Canada in the 21st century, which is a minimum income for every single citizen. So Islam already has minimum income 1,500 years ago. So when we talk about economic progress, brothers and sisters, we're light years ahead of these filthy economies. Let's be very frank. And the United States is worse because there's people who don't have basic health services. People die every single day because they don't have access to health in the United States of America. Buying insurance is just, I mean, I lived there for 10 years. That's why I know firsthand, right? So it's despicable. This is how Islam is powerful. This is how Islam is merciful. That if you describe the Islamic system and just the gist of it in, like, maybe let's say 2 hours to anybody, any human being, the first thing will tell you, okay, where's that place? I'm going to immigrate. Here's my passport. I'm going to throw it away. I'm just going to go to that country. Where's that? Tell me, where is that? And I'll tell you a little story. Basically, when I was 19 years old, I had an internship here in Toronto, and my boss, we used to have lots of discussions and lunch and so forth. So I used to, tell him a little bit basically about, Islamic ideals and values and how Islam is basically his view about how society should be structured. I'm telling you, literally, like after 2 sittings, he's like, okay, where's that place? I'm going to immigrate. Tell me, where is it? I'm buying my flight right now. He was serious. And I start blushing because unfortunately there's no such a place, unfortunately, right now. And this is the Islamic crisis. You are under attack and you're supposed to be the most honorable person in the world. How would you let anybody attack your Sharia? How? What is Sharia? Sharia is mercy for every single human being on earth. It's mercy for the cats and dogs and the whales and the rats and then the rabbits and the crickets even, bro. Sharia is mercy. But you need to understand how it functions. See what I'm saying? So I hope basically I touched your hearts in a couple of things here. But again, the discussion is long. We can sit here for we can do a retreat for 3 days, 72 hours, and we can discuss every aspect of the deen, and we scratch the surface. But you need to learn, and you need to understand, and you need to know. And this is why the IS Institute is here for. Alhamdulillah. So I'll I guess it's good enough, inshallah. I'll leave my brother Asadullah to compliment, inshallah, what we said.
Thank you, Sheikh. Just sort of building off of that, and I'll try to be concise because I know that I think you touched up on most of it. Dealing with the economy, there are many practical applications of Islamic law in society that we can implement that I think would be more beneficial for society. I mean, there are things that are being discussed right now that shouldn't even be discussed in the 21st century. Honestly, if we're even talking about progress, and one of them was, everyone having a basic livable income. That shouldn't even be possible. I mean, the Islamic system, for example, long before when it was in its formative years, if you want to call it that, was already saying that, even conquered populations, even non-Muslim populations who were under the Islamic system did not have to pay, like individuals who were too poor to pay jizya did not have to pay it. People who could not afford to, feed themselves are not required to give a tax. And it was only given to people who could actually even pay the thing. Right today, it doesn't matter if you're dying, you still have to pay your taxes. You're going to jail, and in fact, even some people prefer jail because at least they get free healthcare in there, at least in the United States. And in fact, there was a story a couple of years back, actually, and this is not an exaggeration. An older man with cancer actually held up a bank with a fake gun. I think it was somewhere up north in Detroit or something. And when the police caught him, they asked him why did he hold up a bank with a fake gun. And in fact, apparently he only wanted to steal $1. They asked him why. And he said, because in jail, you'll take care of my cancer. I can't afford it out here. So he actually wanted to go to prison because he was going to die otherwise. So you can understand the corruption of the system there. I mean, here in the United States, I mean, I'm very, I think Canada is very fortunate to have the sort of system that you have in healthcare even with its own flaws. And I hear even the UK brothers, sometimes they're like complaining about their healthcare system. Like, you have no idea. There are people here who spend a third of their paycheck just to have a minimum amount of healthcare, just so they can go to the doctor. And even then, they still have to pay out of pocket. You have no idea. And just recently, even Trump was bragging about how we have the best medicine in the world because he got treated for coronavirus. He had all these huge cocktails of medicine and stuff and the best doctors in the world. Most Americans can't afford what he had. Most Americans can't even afford a fraction of what he got. Most Americans who at his age and contracted coronavirus would have been dead in a few days. And in fact, that's happened all across the country. So, these sort of things Islam is already very clear on, that the state takes care of its people, even its non-Muslim citizens. And that's indisputable. And yet, we have the so-called most advanced countries in the world that are debating whether people who can barely feed themselves have to work 2 or 3 jobs, full-time jobs to survive, can have free healthcare. This is ludicrous. This is, insane. So, there are many other things that we can talk about, but I think most people, when they come to the whole Sharia question, they think about criminal punishments. And my only comment on that would be, and I think Sheikh Usta can clarify further if he wishes, is that when it comes to criminal punishments, and if you're a minority living in the Western country, don't worry about that. That's none of your concern. That's nothing that we can implement as a minority. That's nothing that we should implement as a minority. If you want to talk about that from the context of an Islamic Muslim majority of society, feel free to do so. But being like 1 or 2% of the population in a Western nation that has its own laws and rulings, that's nothing you should even concern yourself with. As far as I'm concerned and understand the Sharia, please forgive me for my ignorance, Sheikh, if that's not the case. Perhaps we should move on to the next question, or do you wish to continue?
If we can, I guess maybe take a quick 5-minute break. So for those who haven't prayed, we allow them the time, and then inshallah we come back. We have our brother Sahil Laura, who's had his hand up for a bit. Inshallah, start with this question. 5 minutes, inshallah.
Okay, may Allah bless you. We'll be back inshallah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, alhamdulillah, you guys had a chance to pray, take a little break, get a little drink of water, reflect upon what the points were brought up by our beloved Sheikh Usta and dear Asadullah. So, with that said, we'll dive right into Sahil's question. Sahil, if you're there, you want to go ahead, just unmute yourself and turn on your video, please. Sahil, you there? Try one more time, inshallah. If not, we'll go ahead. Sahil? All right, let's go ahead with Brother Mason, and then inshallah we can come back to Brother Sahil. Oh, one sec. So Sahil is there. He just couldn't turn on his audio. Give me 1 second.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Okay. Are you able to listen to me?
Yes. Alhamdulillah. Bismillah.
Okay. Okay. So I have a question in reference to the first question about warfare and Islam being spreading by sword. Is Sheikh Usta and Brother Asadullah listening, or are they still?
Yes, we're here.
Okay. Sorry. So I want to ask that sometimes some people, when they ask question about some specific incidents that took place during the time of Prophet ﷺ, in which, and from that, they sometimes try to, like say that it's been spreaded by sword. For example, they take the incident of the Battle of Khandak, in which the Jews broke the alliance with Muslims, and then the non-Muslims were almost about to attack on Muslims, but then Muslims cleverly tackled the issue. And then after that, it was ordered to Muslim that they kill all the Jews. So they killed everyone, except for the children and the women. So how do we answer these kind of questions? I mean, the answer that you gave previously, Brother Asadullah gave, that was a generalized answer. And it's also convincing and logical. I mean, those people who have knowledge and who are non-Muslim, they do accept that it was in fact a good thing that Muslims conquered the land of Persia and Byzantine, because if they would not, then a lot of wrong things would have been happening. In fact, I met one person who was a Jew, and he said that Jews were persecuted in the whole of history before the Muslims. And in fact, the Muslim Spain, Hispania, that was the previous name of it, that was the golden period for the Jews. That was like the golden period of the diaspora. So they do accept that, but sometimes when they get specific to some instances, so how do we answer them? No.
Okay.
That's my question.
Yeah. Asad, do you want to take that, inshallah, or do you want to take it? Inshallah, we'll both do it basically as usual. We're a duo. We're a double team, tag team. So, Akhi Sahil, this is very simple, Akhi. Let me ask a very simple question, and you resolve the whole issue, okay? Because see, the question is wrong, and what I'd like to teach the teenagers and the youngsters and the university students: don't take the question and run with it. Be a critical person, okay? Take the question, look at the question first. See, is there a problem with the question? What's the problem with this question, by the way? You know what's the problem with the question? Let me ask you a quick question.
Okay, I think it's a strawman's argument. First you build an assumption, and then you say that, okay, maybe I think so. That's a problem with it.
But where is the strawman? Where is it specifically?
Firstly, maybe we may sometimes have insufficient knowledge, and they try to bring the issue without bringing the whole context. And it might be presented to us out of context, and since we don't have a knowledge of it, we may end up losing the argument.
Okay, that's general. That's not specific to this question. So let me ask you a quick question, Sahil. If the tribe within Medina was actually a Greek tribe, okay, yeah, a Greek tribe, or let's say Scandinavian tribe for some reason, Okay, because see, the Jews came into Arabia. Yeah, the Jews, who are the Jews? They're the children of Yaqub alayhi salam, where they were living in Palestine, in Al Khalil, right? And then they immigrated to Egypt, and then they immigrated back into. So they were not in Arabia. So they immigrated into Arabia. So let's say instead of the Jews, Scandinavian tribe immigrated, and they settled in Yathrib, right? And they did the exact same. They actually did the huge crime of actually helping the enemy and stabbing the Muslims. Forget the Muslims. Let's take the Muslims out, and let's have basically, I don't know, Persians. So you have Persians in Yathrib and Scandinavian little tribe, and then and then the Arabs came in to fight the Persians, and then the Persian had a pact with the Scandinavian from within their own city to be neutral and to respect the law and to be honorable to the state that's basically taking care of their affairs, and because they're one people, they're one society kind of. And then these guys, they actually go and make a pact with the enemy to kill and slaughter the Persians. What would the Persians do to the Scandinavians? Yeah, so there's a punishment for such a crime. So when you come and tell me, oh, the Jews were killed, I'm like, dude, it has nothing to do with Jews. It's nothing to do with the color. It has nothing to do with ethnicity. That's where the strawman's argument is. You're literally, it's a lie. This question is the whole question is a lie. See what I'm saying? So it has nothing to do with being Jewish or being Arab. You put the Scandinavians with Persians, same stuff. So you see where the problem is in the question?
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with Jews. Jews were persecuted. Habibi, it has nothing to do with ethnicity. There was a crime that was done, and the state punished those who committed the crime, the criminals. Every single person who was associated, a part of this plot and part of the crime was punished. That's it. That's all that happened. Every innocent person was actually respected. Their lives were respected. Beautiful law.
Assalamu alaikum. So, brother, as I understand the question as well, I think that there are some details that are missing as well, and I think that there is a great deal of misinterpretation involving that specific event. Even our hadith are very clear regarding what actually happened. So to give some just very quick context, this was, I think, the second time that particular tribe within Medina had violated their treaty, had violated the law. And this was during a battle that they were actually planning to attack the Muslims from behind, killing men, women, and children. Now, upon realizing this was going to occur, the Prophet ﷺ and others were deliberating about what should be done with these individuals. And I believe a former Jew, was it Saad? I don't recall.
I know him. It was Gadfan. He was from the tribe of Gadfan.
Yeah, so
I have read about this incident.
Recall. So what occurred was that after deliberating with this tribe about what should happen, there were stories about what they were discussing amongst themselves. And in fact, it basically got to a point where they were saying that they were not willing to abide by any other contract other than their own laws. Basically, they were willing to submit to only basically the Jewish law in this respect. So they were judged according to that. And anyone who actually reads the Torah, the Jewish law, will know that actually the punishment that was carried out was against only the soldiers who were trying to conduct this treason. And then the women and children were therefore then captured as a result and spared. Whereas, so this was actually their own law being applied to them under basically what they agreed to. And that stopped the fitna after that. So, and their women and children were protected as a result of being captured by Muslim forces. And also, if you actually read the hadith literature, you'll also find that some of the individuals who were part of that tribe actually converted to Islam because they found that their own law was so absurd in this respect that they weren't even willing to. They were like, no, I don't want to die. So I don't want to be punished by my own laws for treason. So I will become a Muslim instead. And they actually converted. Very few of them did, but it was a very volatile, it was a very chaotic situation. Unfortunately, the aggressors in this case did not allow for the Muslims to apply any sort of merciful, or not, well, they did apply mercy, but to apply certain things that I think would have been better for those people, but they chose their own fates, and as a result, they were punished according to what they wanted. So that's how I understand it. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Sheikh Usta. So.
Yeah.
It's okay, inshallah. For me, I made the point I wanted to make, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, guys. With that said, next question, we will go on to a written question, and then we'll go to Sister Aditi's question, who's at work. So next question is, does Islam endorse slavery? What is meant by the term right hands possess in the Quran? And a related question there, just to throw this one in there too, is regarding the law on women captives of war, will they be forced into relationships of any kind? So does Islam endorse slavery, and what's meant by the term right hands possess?
Okay, perfect. Bless you. So this issue is, again, a very super popular one. And I'm going to say unequivocally, the word slavery, as used here in the West and as understood by the Western civilization, does not exist. Islam does not endorse anything that's close to that. So, you need to understand, basically, Islam it says it's haram, 100% haram, to basically have slavery. From a Western context, this is how it works. 100% is haram, 100%. There's not if, but, or whatever it is. Now, Islam came basically in a society that did have slavery, and Islam kind of got rid of that. How did it get rid of it? Well, it changed the status of these people to become really fully human. People who Islam basically put lots of routes for these people to become fully free individuals in terms of contractual agreements. Yeah. And Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told one of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, whoever basically used to have such a person should feed them from their foods, and should make them wear from what they would wear, and should never call them slaves. So I'm telling you, the slave culture was eradicated by the Quran and the Sunnah. Okay. That being said, basically, there's certain things that happened in war back then during the international law, where countries would actually, in a state of war, would take captives, and those captives, unfortunately, would be mistreated. In the European countries, they would be enslaved. So Islam, to basically kind of do a tit for tat, would basically allow the form of what we call permanent employment, I guess, the closest thing that basically indentured employment, I guess, in the Western legal context. That's the closest topic. When you tell me what is right hand possession, that's the closest thing. It might not be exactly the same, but that's the closest thing. It is way closer to that meaning, and I'm telling you from now, there might be little differences, to slavery. Slavery is far away from it, like basically, the east to the west. See what I'm saying? So if you put a line, and you put indentured servitude, and you put slavery, mulk al-yamin, yeah, would fall way closer to the indentured servitude than slavery. Way. Okay? So what you need to understand, slavery is haram in Islam 100%. 100%. In a state of international law, where the enemy would enslave us, we would basically do a tit for tat, which is kind of like giving a hug for a punch, really, which is basically taking the captives and making them into an indentured servant. That's it, with full rights of humanity. See what I'm trying to say? And all leeway within society for routes for actually full citizenship. Full citizenship. You need to understand, you in Canada, Mrs. Canadian and Mr. Canadian, you get what you call basically worker. There's people who come on temporary worker visas from specifically the Central America to work on your fields, to pick your tomatoes and your fruits here. Basically, pretty close. To be honest, basically the idea of mulk al-yamin is way better than even what you have today in Canada, brothers and sisters. So don't push your ideals on me. We have, as a Muslim, you should push your ideals on others. on others. Okay. So the homeless people here, basically, you give me a piece of paper, tell me I'm a citizen, and then basically I die out of living on the streets in the cold. Well, let's be very frank here. I'm trying to tell you basically this mulk al-yamin, you eat from what the person who holds the right for this mulk al-yamin eats, wears what they wear, gets treated with mercy and love. Actually, they are brothers. You're brothers. You're brothers. You can't beat them. You can't humiliate them. What are you talking about? So definitely, this is basically an issue of international law back then. Today, Islam says, no, we're not going to do that. Islam believes in basic. Islam wants actually even this indentured servitude type of status in society. Yeah, it's like, over here you have citizen and permanent resident and a person of visa, and then there's temporary workers. Yeah, in Islam we have those different styles, and we want to get rid of the indentured servitude. So we will never allow it to actually occur. When it's gone, brothers and sisters, when it's gone, we're not going to let it happen. And the only reason we allowed it from before, from a fiqhi or Sharia perspective, is because the other side is enslaving us. When you're taken and you're lashed and you're killed and your organs are cut and your nose is cut for basically because you didn't have enough cotton. Let's look at the United States of America first. Did you see their babies, the babies of women and men in the cotton fields where their hands were cut in front of their fathers and their limbs were cut in front because they didn't have enough cotton? So don't come and basically push your values on me. This is just a few decades ago. This is not the 12th century, brothers. This is the 20th century and the 19th century. So don't push your values. We need to be strong. We need to be honorable. We need to understand that the Sharia of Allah is the best law for the human being. Period. So today, since basically they stopped enslaving us, well, we say, alhamdulillah, we don't even need to do this whole servitude stuff. See what I'm saying? Because we don't want it in the first place. This is what Islam promotes. When you're taking our people as slaves, don't come and ask me about the servitude. Don't ever do that. But when you stopped, don't come and tell me, oh, you have it in your law. Well, you in your history and in your legal system, you had slavery. So don't come and talk to me like that. See, I'm not here to basically give you the intellectual answer. You can read that in the book. But here, I want to inspire your hearts to have confidence in your deen. Don't come look at my history because your history is worse. Not by a little bit, by leap years, by light years. See what I'm saying? So, alhamdulillah, we as Muslims have every proud moment to raise our head high and be very confident of our deen. We have nothing to basically worry about. You stand still and you stand high, you stand tall and say, yeah, definitely, if you're going to enslave us, we won't do what you're doing. If you're going to rape our women, we're not going to do that to you. But we will basically interact on the international stage with a limited sane repercussions. See what I'm saying? So I hope you guys basically understand that. Again, definitely, anytime, any day, you want to discuss slavery, let's discuss it. But bring their history first. May Allah bless you.
Perfect. Brother Asad, anything to add there?
Yes. So thank you, Sheikh Usta, for making that clear demarcation. I think it is pertinent to make it very clear that the word slavery has a lot of negative connotations attached primarily to European history and understanding of property, which Muslims don't actually share. And in fact, even looking at it from a historical perspective, we need to understand the very big differences between how Islam regarded bondage, servitude, forced servitude, versus how the European and even other Eastern context viewed it. When Islam came into existence, slavery was already an institution in many places in the world, many cultures. As a result, the Muslim community inherited that institution as well. Many people were slaves when they became Muslim. Many individuals, the entire ethic of warfare also kind of involved slavery as a form of punishment and form of control and security. So, I mean, many of you may not realize this, but advanced prison systems did not exist back then. Were paid by, citizens' tax dollars. If you wanted to, make sure the other side didn't try to kill you again, you would capture them and place them in some sort of form of control. And given limited resources, those individuals would have to work in order to pay their own way, I guess you could say, in order to survive. Because if you're living in the middle of a desert, when there's not much to eat and drink, you can't exactly just put somebody in a nice room and feed them and give them water. They have to work for it to some degree, right? And also to make sure that they don't kill you again, you have to make sure that they're put in a legal position where they are basically controlled to some extent. So there were limitations put on the practice in the institution, and I would even argue that the Prophet ﷺ and basically the Quran and Sunnah in general was really taking a very gradualistic approach to abolition. The Prophet ﷺ in numerous cases claimed that there would be great rewards for those who freed slaves, encouraged freeing slaves, freed slaves himself. Companions were known for freeing slaves. Abu Bakr was known for giving his wealth to free slaves. This is part of our tradition. It's considered a moral duty, even in many respects, even for forgiving your own sins to free a slave. This is not apologetic. You look at the hadith, look at the Quran, and so, I mean, it's very clear that slavery was never endorsed in our tradition. However, it was allowed to a limited degree to deal with different warring nations and tribes. And it was limited to such a degree that many of those in bondage would even become, I mean, this may be incomprehensible to many people, but many of those in bondage actually became heads of state. I'm not even joking. So that actually happened on many occasions. Viziers, even, assistants to the Sultan, people who had more power than most free people in the country. Like
scholars.
Like that's insane. So when we talk about slavery, it's like from the perspective of Islam, that your conception of what counts as a slave does not exist. Our understanding of bondage was very different. It was allowed under certain circumstances and with a great deal of limitation, to the point where even abusing your slave would make them free. Slaves didn't even get punished in the same way that free people did. In fact, they even got half the punishment most of the time, because it was regarded as a responsibility of their so-called master whenever they did something wrong, right? So even then, it was like there were so many restrictions. So if we want to talk about slavery, I think there's a lot of loaded assumptions there. That said, in the contemporary period, it's sort of even an irrelevant question. It's a relevant concern, because the international scene, and a lot of people don't know this, has finally abolished slavery across the board, at least explicitly. I mean, there are other forms of slavery that we don't really talk about very much that are named of something else now. But in reality, the Western world was not the first to abolish slavery based on moral grounds. In fact, the reason that slavery was abolished across the Western world in general was because the industrial period came into existence. And then people had the freedom and the privilege to start thinking about labor outside of a slave context. So now we have machines to do this. So for example, in the United States, when the Industrial Revolution was occurring, especially in the North, and there was much more industry occurring up north, many Northerners, they addressed the slave question more from an economic perspective than they did from a moral one. In fact, it wasn't until the world started advancing technologically that the whole question of slavery became a moral issue. In fact, prior to that, the majority of societies were based on slavery, on forced labor that they captured mainly from warfare or other immoral means. Correct. So, I mean, we need to really understand this. I love a whole lot of individuals, especially those who are ignorant of history. They love to come up, especially in the West. They love to talk about, oh, how come there's slavery in your law books? There's slavery here, there's slavery there, in your history. It's like, your society did not oppose slavery under any moral authority, under any moral conscience. In fact, it only began because you realized you didn't need slaves to produce the things that you had. It wasn't because you actually cared. If you didn't have that stuff, like, you wouldn't have even brought up that question to begin with. And it's even the same when we talk about women's rights. The whole context of women voting and stuff, and even women being involved economically, did not occur until certain technological advances in society and things like this. Most people didn't even see women in the West as worthy of having a vote or even having the right to work until a certain society started to develop. It had no morality, moral conscience behind it. So we talk about even women's rights and stuff, and that's a whole different question. But yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of ways to deal with this. And most importantly, just to be very concise here, there's a huge demarcation between the loaded term slavery from the Western context and what Islam regards as bondage. And like I said, it's actually an irrelevant concern today, because we all agree by contract that we're not going to do that to each other. And as a result, that's not going to occur. Now, what's going on in the UAE and other places right now, in terms of how they're mistreating people, even that's against Islam. Even that's against Islam. Okay, the way those people are being handled and mistreated, a lot of people who are coming into work and are being treated like they don't have a right to their own lives and their own selves, you know, that's completely against Islam. Okay, so if you want to talk about that in this sort of context, in this contemporary context, then yes, we can agree wholeheartedly that's more in line with the type of slavery that was practiced in the West than what the Muslims were engaged in prior. So that would be my final statement there, inshallah.
Definitely. Jazakumullah khair. I really appreciate that, inshallah. So let's take Sister Aditi's question. She's at work, so she won't be able to comment, but she's written this here. I'm going to read it out, and then we do have quite an interesting, exciting list of questions. So let's do this, inshallah, in the time we can. So we have, why does Islam's God, Allah, like to keep his followers in fear? He wants to be like a dictator, where Quran says, if you're not a Muslim, you'll go to hell. Other religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, their holy books don't say that if you're not a Hindu or a Buddhist, you'll go to hell. It just says that if you do a bad deed, meaning you're a bad person, then you'll go to hell. So the question is, why does Allah like to keep his followers in fear? Where if you're not a Muslim, you'll go to hell, and other religions don't say that.
All right. Well, I guess this is not correct. I mean, other faiths basically do say if you're not a believer, you would go to hell, so this is not accurate. That's number one. Number two, let's assume it's accurate, but it's contradictory. If this is accurate, if this statement is accurate, it's contradictory, because not believing is a bad deed. Like if I swear, if let's say I swear at somebody, that's a bad deed. It's the lady is saying you're going to go to hell for that because it's a bad deed. Well, not believing in the whole worldview and the whole thing is a way bigger big deal. So it's either a contradiction or inaccurate question. So again, I mean, and definitely Allah is the most merciful. And let's deal with the question head on. Yeah, Islam says if you are a non-Muslim and you die on non-Islam, you're gonna go to hell. You have an issue with that? Well, anybody who has an issue with that basically, needs to really read the Quran well, because at the end of the day, the Quran tells you, look at life, look at the heavens, look at the worlds. You're living a reality. You're gonna die, and there's someone who created this whole universe, and there's an afterlife. So if you want to make the wrong choices, well, it's tough luck. And if you're going to university, they tell you, look, if you don't make 65, if you don't have an accumulative average of 65%, you fail. You don't get a degree, but you can jump up and down, do whatever you want to do. But it's not going to change. It's 65%. If you're not going to study, you're not going to basically pass. You're not going to get a degree. Why? Because they're the one who set the game rule. The rules of the game is set by the university. You want to apply in that university, you want to live in that university, you want to go to that university. Well, if you're living this life, the one who created life sets the rules of life. So those who basically always whine about basically why is God one about, well, he sets the rules. He sets the rules. Yeah. And the third point is those who are very biased and trying to poke holes in Islam, which is unpokeable, just to let you know. Forgot about all the Jannah talk, all the mesmerizing bliss of eternal happiness and eternal love and eternal enjoyment. Where did that go? Oh, God is so evil because he created Jannah for the human being. God created Jannah for every one of you. Muslim or non-Muslim. Everybody, every human being, Muslim or non, has their spot in Jannah. God booked it for you. Allah, the one you're talking about, in such a statement, by the way, I don't like the sentence. So if you guys gonna, if Muslims gonna come and relate questions from non-Muslims, they have to be with the proper adab with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this God, Islam's God. Don't say that, please. That's wrong. So Allah booked a Jannah place for eternal bliss and eternal happiness for every Jewish and Christian and Mary in this world. Every non-Muslim. Every non-Muslim. He booked their spot. There's a place in Jannah. It's secured. It's booked. It's booked. Where's that talk, brothers and sisters? The reason I'm speaking this way, you ask me, why is Sheikh speaking this way? Because I see the defeated mentality in some of our questions. We have to be stronger than this. We have to be firm in our belief. You live only once, yeah, definitely. You're gonna die after that, and then you're gonna meet your Lord. You're gonna meet Allah. So where's the Jannah talk for these people? Why is this question so biased? And until now, I didn't enjoy any question because every question is messed up. I want one good question. I want one good question. Good question. Basically, like, there's no like it's not either like it's not biased. Or, give me a good question.
Inshallah, I'll give you a couple.
Yallah, I'll be waiting for those, inshallah.
Inshallah. But Asadullah, anything to add there?
Okay. Thank you, Sheikh. I will address this. I'll try to address this with some other points. So first, I think that whole sentiment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to keep his followers in fear is really a very contemporary one that has been instilled even many probably from like certain cultural perspectives, and maybe even in how we kind of sometimes we try to make people to become more pious. We address them in a way that where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looked at as simply this, as one attribute, as only one aspect of himself, as being a punisher or something of the sort. And I think this is problematic. And I do see that there's a lot of assumptions built into the question as well. And I don't know where the sentiment is coming from necessarily, but I will try to address why I think it is problematic. So first, I want to note that, so to get to the bottom of the issue here, that in Islam, non-Muslims don't simply go to hell because they're born non-Muslims or because they just happen to be non-Muslims. They have to have, the only reason they go to hell is if they don't have a valid excuse. For example, if they're not ignorant or if they have no access to the truth. Then of course Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show mercy to them, right? So it's not simply based on your identity that a person goes to hellfire. In fact, the Quran says very explicitly that hellfire is for the arrogant, for those who don't fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that have no sense of like humility in their hearts for the truth, right? So these individuals are not simply just, oh, I happen to be Hindu or I happen to be Buddhist or whatever. No, it's much deeper than that in our theology, in our aqidah. Likewise, I think the issue here is that when you talk about fear, and is fear always necessarily connected to being some sort of dictator? A dictator rules by their nafs. They rule by oppressing people. The fear that people get from a dictator is because of the oppression, the injustice that they feel, right? But if you live in a civilized society, if you live in a society that grants justice, right, the type of fear that is there, the type of fear of violating the law, that is more like a fear of violating your own morality, your own principles, the things that you agree with, of violating truth. So you should fear. Fearing a law, fearing falling into falsehood, fearing violating moral morality, that's a healthy fear. That's a correct fear. That is a just fear that we should have as Muslims. So just because we are told that we should fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we should fear being punished, this doesn't necessitate that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a dictator, astaghfirullah, right? It doesn't necessitate that at all. I mean, you live in a society right now. Are there not rules that you agree to? Are there not punishments that you agree to? Do you not believe that murderers should be killed? Do you not believe rapists should be jailed? Do you not believe these things? Should they not fear those things? Should you not fear those things for yourself? You agree with that fear. You accept that fear because that is a righteous fear. So let's not assume that fear is similar to tyranny or to oppression. There are various forms. So when we say fear Allah subhanahu, we're not saying fear Allah because of an oppressive sentiment. We're saying fear Allah because that is the truth. And as a human being, not just as a Muslim, but as a human being, you should fear being upon falsehood. You should fear being against the truth. Right? So you say, well, this person does good deeds, but if they do not do good deeds based on the right intention, if they do good deeds based on falsehood, is it really a good deed? Because Islam is not simply about action. It's also about your intention. It's about where you're coming from, your motivation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you your talents. He gave you your intellect. He gave you your morality. And if somebody's going to go in the afterlife and say, no, I did it myself, that is a profound form of arrogance. I deserve to go to heaven. It doesn't matter what truth I was upon. I deserve because I fed a poor person. There has to be a difference. This sentiment, and I'm not saying you necessarily, sister, but I'm saying the sentiment is almost like a very postmodern one, that the truth doesn't matter. What matters is your actions. But it's the truth that defines the value of our actions in reality. It is not ourselves. Because if it's society and ourselves, then we are saying that we are God, we're Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we are equivalent, that we are putting ourselves as partners to Him, that we can judge what is valuable. And I think that is a big problem. So yes, I do believe, yes, that somebody who knows the truth deserves to be punished for it. They deserve to be punished because that is the very foundation of everything that they are as a human being. So that's how I would say it. And, I hope you didn't take offense to what I've said, but please try to re-examine these things. Try to think in a more balanced manner, and you'll see what I'm saying is not off any sort of manhaj or anything. You'll understand. So thank you.
Amazing, brother. Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair for that. So let's take this one. So we have, can secularism or non-religious positive law be an agent for divine justice? Can secularism be part of God's divine providence and justice?
Can you repeat the last piece?
Yes. Can secularism be part of God's divine providence and justice?
Again, like, subhanAllah, may Allah help me. These questions are so secularism, by definition, is a separation of God's laws from the man-made laws. A person who believes in secularism says God is the man, is the human being. You see what I'm saying? When you go say, I am God, you're secular. That's what secularism means. The God of the human being is himself and herself. That's what secularism means. Being a Muslim, being a submitter, you're saying, no, my God is Allah. My God is the creator of the universe. That's the difference, right? See, what I'm saying? The question is contradictory. How could you mix basically a contradiction? You're saying basically, can secularism, which is a rejection of God, be lumped with a little bit of God's laws to? See what I'm saying? The question didn't make sense to me. I'm sorry, but and then the reason is because people have been pushing. We're living in a day and age right now where atheism and scientific materialism, consumerism, liberalism, secularism is being pushed down our throats. It's a militant liberal left. That's what's happening. So you need to understand, why would somebody ask such a question? You either be secular, either be Muslim. You want to be a kafir, be a kafir. You want to be a kafir, just leave Islam. You don't believe it, leave it. Or take it and take it right. Allah subhanahu, when He spoke to Yahya alayhi salam, one of the Anbiya, says, Ya Yahya, khudh al-kitaba biquwwa. Oh Yahya, take the book with strength. What does that mean with strength? It's a figurative speech for when you take it, you take it. Don't go like wishy-washy, flip-flopper. See what I'm saying? Why would somebody even care about say, can I mix a little bit of secularism with Islam? You care about Islam? What do you care about it? Just leave it, man. You don't want it, just leave it. Why am I saying that? Because trying to mix it with some liberal thoughts, is confusing millions of people. So you're not getting your own sin, you're getting the sin of confusing millions of people. And this is what fitna is all about, really. What does shaitan do? What is the role of shaitan? One thing. get people to deviate from Islam. So when you try to accommodate, try to basically say, can I do a compromise? I know it's true, I want some of it, but I want some of this too. When you do that, what do? You're confusing everybody else. You're trying to have a genetically modified Islam. That's what I call it. I've been calling it for 15 years, a genetically modified Islam, GMI. You want a little bit of Islam with a little bit of something else. Brothers and sisters, the worst thing you could do in life is not kufr. The worst thing, listen to this very carefully. The worst thing you could do in life is not just kufr. There's kufr plus more. Is when you actually try to reshape the message of Islam, the message of Allah, and taint it and mutate it. When you do that, that's worse than actually just rejecting Allah alone. Because now, see, some people can reject Allah, like Abu Talib, the uncle of the Rasul, supported the messenger all his life. He got the least punishment in hellfire is for Abu Talib. But there's people like Al-Walid al-Mughira, Abu Jahl, and Abu Lahab, who's also mentioned in the Quran by name. He not only he rejected God, but he fought the message of Islam. He wanted to destroy it, to deviate people away from it. He beat people to leave it, tortured people to leave it, created media campaigns to delude people away from it. That's what's worse. You could say, look, I'm just going to live my own life. I don't want to I don't want to bother anybody. I choose to not be a Muslim. Definitely you're going to hell. But see, hell is levels. There's many degrees, many different places in hellfire. What's worse than that is when you try to change Islam. Let's mix it up. Let's fudge Islam a little bit. Let's give this little kind of explanation. Let's try to basically kind of, brothers and sisters, if you want to lose your humanity, you know who did this? Believers of the past nations. There's a nation of believers. Once upon a time, there was a nation of believers. Yeah? They were living beside the sea. It was a seaport. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed from his law that they can't fish on Saturdays. Now, day after day, the fish became acquainted that nobody fishes on Saturday, so they started to be very playful and too much fish in that lake or whatever it is, or that sea. And so people started saying, salivating, yo, there's lots of fish. We're losing lots of money. It could be a rich guy. So what did they do? They went to their sheikh. They went to the sheikh. Yo, sheikh, can I get a fatwa, please? $10. Who can bet a little bit more than that? $20. Can you give me a fatwa, please? How can I find a loophole? How can I change this law, make it a little bit more adaptable to my needs? Astaghfirullah al-Azim. Astaghfirullah al-Azim. You know what I would tell such a person if I was living there? If I was a sheikh living there, you know what I tell him, brother, if you're really, 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 really khalas, you're adamant at doing the sin, just go do it. Go fish on Saturday. Wake up 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. and go start fishing, brother. At least you'll say, my brother. You'll say a Muslim. Yeah, you sin, no problem, sins. Allah forgives. If you're adamant, if khalas, that's it, you have to fish. This is an easier, lesser of two evils. But if you want me to change the rules of Islam and give you a fatwa that changes the deen by telling you, like the sheikh from that city told their people, throw your net on Friday night and pick up the net Sunday morning. Oh, it's halal, it's halal. Allah cursed them by making them apes and pigs. Do you know what that means, brothers and sisters? They lost their humanity. Allah told them, you don't deserve to be a human, not even a kafir, a human being. Not even a kafir, disbelieving mushrik, you don't deserve to be. You deserve to be an animal. And there's some joshmo because they're celebrity, little blah, blah, blah. And I don't like to be a celebrity, alhamdulillah. Habibi, you play games with Islam, Allah, wallahi, subhanahu wa ta'ala, going to burn you forever. In the middle in the nth depth of hellfire. Don't go play the games. If you're not a scholar, shut your mouth. See what I'm saying? And I'm speaking basically for the celebrity dudes in the World Wide Web. I'm a software engineer, by the way, yeah? 20 years experience, so internet, I was born with the internet. I'm a Gen X guy. I'm not too old. I look a little bit older than I am. SubhanAllah. When you take the laws of Allah lightly, you have the jur'ah, the courage to basically go and speak and change the deen. Oh, hijab is not really fard, it's actually just recommended. Brother, like, what planet are you on? Oh, no, mortgage is okay because, you know, we're going to lose our money because of rent. I'm like, brothers and sisters, I'll tell you very quickly, yeah? You don't want your hijab, just lose it, bro. Lose it, sis. Don't change the deen. Don't go say it's not wajib. It's kufr to say that. And don't go tell me mortgage is halal, man. If you really want a mortgage, go get one, man. Inshallah, yani may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you the chance to live and make tawbah. Meet Allah with a sin better than meeting him with changing his deen. Wallahi al-azim, you will never be saved if you change his deen. But you have so much. The gate of rahmah, of mercy, is so huge for the sinners. That's fine if you go through a process, a phase in your life, taking riba or not having your hijab. It's a sin. It's a grave sin. But it's not kufr. It's not challenging Allah. We don't fear Allah anymore. Every Jewish Muslim wants to challenge the Lord of the universe. But alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will have servants of His on this planet that will always say the haqq. And will never fear anybody for saying the haqq. And this is the first trait of scholars, real scholars. So let's beware, guys. Let's beware. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us all, inshallah. I'll leave Brother Asad, inshallah, to comment a little bit further. May Allah bless him. He's been always basically augmenting my arguments because I focus on certain things that I feel are a little bit more needed on the streets. So let him, inshallah, deal with the intellectuals in peace.
Thank you for your comments, Sheikh. Although I don't know if I'm deserving of that either, of those your kind remarks. But that said, I would say that let's look at it from this perspective. Islam, as we know it today, has been around for 1,400 years. We have an intellectual tradition, a legal system, scholars for 1,400 years, a tradition that fashioned a golden age, a tradition that ruled the world, a tradition that has created a culture, has created an understanding of the world far beyond many others. And in fact, many religions, many perspectives are now dead. But Islam continues to thrive and continues to seek to be primary, to be in the minds of many Muslims across the world, even though we're dealing with so many things. But you look at Muslim society, Muslim majority societies, and Islam is still an integral part of their societies and their cultures. Whereas, Christianity has become nothing more than a hobby in all Western countries. And now consider the Western tradition, the secular liberal tradition has only been around for the past maybe 200 or 300 years. We want to talk about what we should be combining, but why? I mean, why should we be combining? We have a seasoned, mature tradition that understands the world, that sees the world in a very nuanced, in a realistic way, that has dealt with all of the problems throughout time, a living fiqh tradition. A living tradition of fiqh, right? And you're only dealing with a society, secular liberalism, that has only been dominant for the past 200 years or so. A society that has been built primarily upon war. I mean, all the major wars in the past 200 years have been brought about by secular liberal nations, and that's how they sought dominance. And in reality, many of these Western countries don't even have a real culture. I mean, Canada, United States, I mean, we're based primarily on consumerism and technology and science. But if you talk about what the culture is of the West or the beliefs or the principles, most people don't even know what those are. Most people can't even tell you why they believe the things they do. They just know that they're superior, quote unquote, based on very artificial standards, material standards. So think about that. Do you want something that has a lot of substance or something that just came to existence? Do you prefer the mature individual who has lived a great deal of experience in their life and has wisdom, or do you prefer the infant? What are you trying to combine here? What sort of understanding are you trying to combine? But not only that, but consider this as well, that Islam is a whole way of life that was sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as being the truth, there are always going to be answers to all of our problems and our issues in society. Whereas, all other systems of belief, they only have elements of the truth, because even though the fitrah can be corrupted, it can't be completely destroyed, right? So yes, many brothers and sisters, you may be attracted to certain secular liberal principles. You may be attracted to the concepts of freedom, for example, but Islam also understands freedom, but from a very different perspective. You don't have to combine anything. You just have to understand it from the Islamic viewpoint. There's no such thing as secular Islam. There's no such thing as liberal Islam. There's just Islam, and then there's secular liberalism. They may have similar concepts in terms of what they're saying. Maybe one side says freedom, the other one says freedom, but it's a different understanding. There's nothing to combine. You just need to comprehend how Islam approaches this issue, how it approaches its own concepts, its own terminology. Okay, you can find the solutions to all the problems. Like today, we have a lot of sisters who are, not a lot, but I would say there's a significant minority who are going towards feminism due to their own personal grievances with maybe their own cultures, or maybe certain men, or what they don't comprehend about the Islamic position on women's rights, or how women are supposed to be treated with respect and dignity and honor. Sheikh Usta, I apologize I didn't tell you this earlier, but I'm going to be a father soon. I'm going to have a daughter, alhamdulillah. So these are things that I'm
congratulations, mashallah. Bless you.
Thank you. So and I'm concerned about my daughter as well, living in the society and also living among others who may not have a correct perception of the Islamic rights given to a woman. Okay, so I understand that sentiment, but we have to also understand that our tradition is vast, it's rich, it's nuanced. We have more women in our tradition that were scholars and women of power. And I'm not talking about in the liberal sense, but in talking about the Islamic tradition, in the sense of their influence. Even our Sahabi, like the women, our mother, Aisha, okay, was a much more excellent woman than you'll find any woman today. Fatima. I mean, the list could go on. We have our exemplars who not only lived a proper Islamic life, but lived it as a woman, okay? And we have a lot of sisters, we have a lot of brothers who don't comprehend our tradition, and that's why they're sort of trying to fill the void by saying, well, can we mix these concepts? And it has nothing to do with there being a problem with our tradition. It has everything to do with our lack of education of what our tradition stands for and what it teaches and what the concepts of our tradition are, right? And how we define them, etc. So I think this is, this question is coming from a place of just a lack of knowledge. And I say, delve into your tradition more. You will see the beauty of it, the complexity, and you'll start to see how shallow secular liberal society actually is after some time. So thank you.
Jazakallah khair, Allah barak feek. It is past 7, but we started a little late, so I would like to take one more question if we can. This question is with regards to Sharia law in the Muslim countries. So one of the questions is, if Sharia is the best, why are Muslim rulers hesitant in enforcing complete Sharia laws in their country? This is another question, but similar in this line, which is the Muslim lands and countries are not doing well, so why not adopt secularism like the West? So it's just the opposites, but I'll leave those both there for you guys so you can kind of comment. So why are Muslim rulers hesitant? Second is, why not adopt secularism since Muslim countries are not doing well?
Yeah, this question is important, at least the first part of it, because you need to understand the historical context. We, as an Ummah, we've been in decline for the last 300 plus years. A little more than that, really, but at least this was where the real, free fall was happening. what makes a civilization progress? Let me just kind of flip this question around a little bit. What you care about, the question, what the questioner cares about is, how do we have a society where we're inventing the iPhone, the iPads, we're building the latest and greatest quantum computers and the floating trains and all that kind of stuff, all the beautiful technology and the advancement in sciences and the medicine, and how can we be a society that produces things and is innovative and creative and have a high quality of life? This is what you're asking about, right? What makes a society or a civilization progressive or progress? The question of progress has to do with human structures. Anybody who studies management understands that if there is no, if you're managing over 150 people, unfortunately, I studied management at the graduate level, and I'm a manager myself right now of a little, department of a company. So the minute basically you have over 150 people, definitely you can't basically interact one-on-one anymore. What you need an idea, a philosophy, a culture. We call it in the business world corporate culture that runs multinational corporations with like tens of thousands of people. So if you expand that even further to a full nation, a full civilization like the Muslim Ummah for 2 billion people, or any other nation per se, by the way, you're talking about basically an idea that shapes the minds of people so they can move in a unidirectional way. Because see, you're either basically moving against each other and there's conflict, or everything is moving in nice lines. Basically when you go for Fajr after sunrise or at sunrise, and you see the ducks, those beautiful ducks over here. Basically, we have lots of ducks, and they go in like everything is in shape, kind of that V-shaped, so beautifully structured. Yeah, imagine the ducks are basically kind of flying all over the place. It's just these two kind of nice images is what basically makes a nation progress, and a nation basically stays in decline and conflict and civil wars and famines and all sort of basically backwardness basically. So to structure humanity in the same line, you need to convince all the ducks to fly in the same line in that V. You lead, and you guys basically are on the sides, and you are behind those, and those are behind these, and so forth. That's what makes a civilization. So I'm making it as simple as possible. Yeah, so you take a nation to structure everybody. You need an idea, a belief, a system, a vision. Yeah, what life is all about. A vision that unifies everybody, so everybody's not conflicting with everybody else. Everybody's in agreement. Yeah, we're gonna live this way. And if you're gonna get married, well, you're gonna go propose. If you don't get proposed, we're gonna beat you up. Let's say a tribe does this. Then now the marriage issue in that tribe is solved, because everybody knows when they're gonna get married, they're gonna go and ask for the hand of a lady. They're not gonna go do the Zorro way. They're gonna go and grab a girl from somewhere and kidnap her. Doesn't happen there. Somebody does it, gets punished. So there's a cohesion, there's an intellectual cohesion, there's a value system that gets built within human societies. And now you can start making values one by one for every aspect of life. It becomes very complicated, complex, and unmanageable. So what do? You create one basic idea about how all of life should be resolved, and then you make that as a springboard for every question about life. That little idea, that basic comprehensive idea, we call it comprehensive idea, becomes your intellectual basis or your doctrine or your creed or your aqidah. Becomes the intellectual basis for a way of life. Now, way of life basically is two things, really. Is the intellectual basis, that aqidah, that view, that vision about how life should be structured, and all the solutions that emanate from that little idea about all aspects of life. Together they make an ideology, they make a way of life, they make a deen. In Arabic, they make a deen. A deen is a aqidah and a sharia, is an intellectual basis with the systems of life that structure all of human affairs. That's how human progress happens, brothers and sisters. Yeah, but this is what we need to teach this to the West. Unfortunately, the West knew it, figured it out in the 14th century, 15th century, created a little creed for themselves called secularism, built few systems of life to basically run life based upon that idea, which is capitalist economics and democratic and Republican parliamentarian and non-parliamentarian, basically, governing systems, and individualistic and human rights-based social systems. So all of aspects of life are based upon that little doctrine called secularism. Okay, then Europe structured itself. When a society structures itself, you're going to see progress. Any society that structures itself, doesn't matter how indecent it is, like the West, it'll produce iPhones and iPads and creates hospitals and centers of education, blah, 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 blah. China right now has a communist political party, but structured life in China where economics is capitalist. There's free market economy. Well, but let's say it's free market economy, a little more free than everybody else, actually. I've been there to China myself. Forget China for now. I'll give you a lecture on China later. But it's structured. People agree. We're going to obey the Communist Party. Nobody messes with the Communist Party. And we're going to create jobs, and everybody's going to be working. We're going to get food back to the table. So people accepted that formula that was proposed by, the communist leaders in the late 70s, and they agreed to it, and they built today's China. So there's progression. Us in the Muslim world, a Salafi hates a Sufi hates a Salafi, and they do takfir on each other. And Ikhwani hates the Tahriris, and the Tahriris hate the Ikhwanis, and the Tablighis hate the Barelwis, and the Barelwis hate the blah, blah. Everybody hates everybody. We're a big mess, man. What you talking about, man? You know why we're in big mess? Because we are weak. We are a big mess. That's why we can't progress. And when you're weak, what happens to you, brothers and sisters? Wake up call. Knock, knock, knock. The strong eats the weak. The weak. The big fish eats the small fish. What do you think? Somebody's going to come and save you? No. If you're weak on the international arena, Brother Asad, I didn't want to comment when he was saying, but we're still in the age of empires. The age of empires will never stop. Maybe that's the only comment I have on Brother Asad's. Some, I know he didn't mean it, but some might understand that the age of empires was back then in the last 150 years. We're not. No. Habibi, as long as there's human life on earth, you are living in the age of empires. That's how it works. Whoever structured the United Nations and the World Bank and the IMF and the Security Council, and the one who has basically the control of these institutions, is the one who is basically the strongest nation on earth. That's basic international relations. Yeah. So there's no police for the world. There's a police in your city. I don't know if it does its job, but at least there is one, right? You can call somebody. Somebody comes to take your phone away, you can call 911. Help me. On a national level today, if somebody comes to take your country, where are you going to go? And most likely is going to be a person who really is owning these institutions. So if you call the United Nations, like, hey, Bob, can you help me? I'm like, yeah, I'm taking over your country right now. You know what I'm saying? So there's no police in the world, in the world stage. So you, as Muslimin, you guys are messed up. You're weak. You're defeated. You're on your knees. That's why basically you got colonized. You guys got owned. You know what I'm saying? You got owned, real owned. Like it or not, it's literal. It's actually literal. In 1909, you were done. Somebody came to your capital, the Istanbul, during Khalifa Abdul Hamid, rahimahullah, and they did a coup, and they imprisoned your Khalifa and your president, and they divided your country a few years later. By 1917, you're gone. You're a bunch of losers. So wake up, man. Wake up. Go search for the aqidah that you embrace. If you want to bring our nation and our countries back to progress, you have to have an aqidah that everybody believes in, a structure of life that basically everybody believes in, agrees upon. Yes, it is haram to do riba. Everybody has to accept it. Yes, it's fard to wear the hijab. Everybody has to accept it. We agree how we can live life, then we can have cohesion. With cohesion and harmony comes development and progress and scientific advancement and economic development and riches and strength and whatever you want. We're going to have basically gardens and grasses and parks that are all green and beautiful life. If you put 5 Muslims together in a room, they're going to start quarreling, bro. Stop this hate. And this is what I3 calls for. We are not Salafi, we're not Tablighi, we're not Tahriri, we're not Ikhwani, we're not Sufi. We love all of them. We're all of them together. We're a mix. Take all of them together and mix them up. We're every Muslim. We love every Muslim on the Quran and Sunnah. Within the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah is us, inshallah. And we are people who tolerate difference in opinion. As long as within the Quran and Sunnah and within the perimeter of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we are tolerant. We are only intolerant for intolerance. And we will basically stand in people's faces. That's what we teach. We want to change the world, inshallah, to be a better place. This is why Allah created us. For imarat al-ard, to build this planet, to create justice in this planet. And that's why we have a vision. We have an inspiring idea that we want the humanity to actually live by. Not just the Muslimin, not just the Pakistanis, not just any like the Egyptians. We want the world to taste the mercy of this beautiful deen that can make the world a better place. And if you really want world peace, there's only one way for it. It's Islam. Islam will get you world peace because it's going to create justice and mercy between everybody. Muslims and non-Muslims, males and females, parents and children, neighbors and employees and employers, and everybody. Everybody. See what I'm saying? So when you come to me and tell me, can we use secularism? Well, okay, well, look, I'm gonna go further. I apologize for a little bit prolonging this a little bit, but it's very important because, and this deserves to be a full lecture, to be honest. If you're a secular person, and there's lots of secular Muslims, liberal secular Muslims, right? They're not Muslim really, but by name. Okay? Some of them basically might have liberal secular tendencies, but they're still Muslim. They have some issues, but so anyway, that person who's proposing that the Muslimin adopt secularism so we can progress back. If you understood what I just said in the last 10 minutes, you know what that means? That means you want everybody to believe in the aqidah as secularism, which is rejection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and believing in it, and believing in the Western way of life, and the liberal way of life. And you need everybody, you need to convert all Muslims. So go start doing da'wah. Go start doing da'wah. For sure, basically, you're going to be in trouble. You need to convert the 2 billion Muslims to secular liberals. Once you do that, then we're going to have cohesion because everybody's going to be secular. As long as there's secular, some of us secular, some of us want real Islam, we're going to keep clashing. But this is why basically we need to stand, we need to expose these people because they're the one who's creating tension. Who's creating tension? There are two types, sorry. I want to be just. The Muslimin, even the Muslimin themselves, as I said, I just critique the movements. They create tension because we were so divisive. We can't tolerate somebody saying, "Oh no, it's actually mandub this." No, it's wajib, and you have to basically go and like smack them, bro. There's difference in opinion. It's legal. Chill. You know what I'm saying? So there's two types of people that are destroying our ummah: the liberal seculars and the intolerant Muslims. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us. I hope I gave you a full answer in this one, because this is important, inshallah. Allah barak fikum. Allah bless you, inshallah. And Asad can continue, inshallah.
I would simply say this, sort of just adding to those sentiments that, I think the Muslims ourselves are to blame for a lot of our problems. I don't say this as a defeatist or anything like that, but, looking at our history, for example, even my ancestors, al-Andalusi was not conquered by virtue of the strength of its enemies, but by the weakness of its allies. My ancestors were slaughtered and exiled because they started fighting amongst themselves first for power and resources. So I think that learning our history, we can realize that in reality, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has brought this upon us because we brought it upon ourselves. And I think that once we realize that, we'll start to sort of reorganize our thoughts in many ways. That said, I also want to be clear that I think that there is a trend among many young Muslims today, what Sheikh Usta referred to as the intolerant types, who I also believe are in many ways influenced by secular liberal principles. Because if you know anything about liberalism is a reactionary ideology. It's always in opposition to something. Being liberal from what? Liberating from what? And one of the central tenets of secular liberal is to attack tradition, especially religious tradition. And you have a lot of young Muslims today who are untrained, who lack qualifications, who get a sizable following online, for example, who are now literally turning the dawah, turning the Islam into a reactionary ideology against the scholarly class and against other Muslims in general. And I'm not going to name names, but I will say that this is in and of itself influenced by secular liberalism. And for those of you who know this hadith, one of the signs of the end times, one of the reasons that, or the main reason that we lose knowledge is because the scholars pass away, right? So we know that the scholars die, we lose their knowledge. But then the question remains is, well, why is there no one to replace them? Who is to replace them? You know, if they all die off and there's no knowledge, why is there nobody to replace them? And I think part of it, personally, from my perspective, seeing how the Muslim youth are reacting today, especially, and there's a certain segment of online, especially, it's because there's no respect for our tradition. There's no respect for scholarship. There's no respect for those who have studied, those who have more authority over us, those who are heirs to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, those who have legitimately, despite their flaws, despite the many flaws, because we're all human, despite their fallibility, are still should be respected for the knowledge that they have, should be respected for the things that they teach. And yet we have a segment within the Muslim youth who is trying to destroy all of it, who's trying to tear it all down for their own egos, for their own, to become their own authorities, their own scholars in the eyes of others. And even for me personally, when I see that, for me, that's a secular liberal mentality, because what liberalism does is it tries to destroy the foundations of religious tradition. And this is what these same Muslims are doing, these intolerant Muslims. They're trying to destroy our tradition in a different way by claiming, oh, no, we're trying to revive Islam. You don't have the right to revive Islam. You don't have the privilege to revive Islam. Nobody gave you the ijazah to revive Islam. Like, nobody gave you anything to revive Islam. You have no right. Correct people? Yes, you have a right. But to undermine the scholarly class, I mean, this is something we should be running away from. This is something we should be pointing out. This is secular liberalism right here. But, these people are saying, no, we're fighting against liberalism. No, they're not, because they're acting like liberals. This is how liberals would behave towards their own religions. This is how Christians started to behave, the Protestant, how they behave towards the Catholic and Orthodox churches. They just started to destroy their own scholars. That's why they're like now, 30,000 denominations, sects of Christians. They have no unity whatsoever. They don't even control their own secular societies. They've been completely corrupted. So something to consider. That would be my final sentiment there. And inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve our scholars regardless of their flaws and forgive them, because their knowledge, as Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, right? He wrote in one of his many works regarding the heirs of the Prophet ﷺ, that the knowledge of a scholar is greater than the basic worship of a lay person, right? The knowledge of a scholar, of a sincere scholar, that is their gateway to Jannah, right? Like that is, of course they have to pray and stuff, obviously, but that is greater than the devout worship of a lay person. Okay. But please correct me if I'm wrong on that. That just recently read that though. So when we see a lot of these young Muslims, like 18, 20 something year old, even 30-year-old Muslims who have no knowledge, no formal training, no have not been regarded, and they're going after scholars, wallahi, this is liberalism too. We need to regard this as being a secular sentiment. Okay. So, because this is wrong. Forgive me for my passionate rant there, but I'm just a little bit tired of seeing that. Forget if Sheikh Usta were to be attacked like that, or any other Sheikh, I would be extremely angry. I have no right to even challenge him. Even we may even disagree, but I have no right to stand up to him like some of these people do. And fear Allah. I'm telling you, to the youth, fear Allah, because you will be punished for how you speak down to scholars and people of knowledge. You will be punished for that. It is promised. So please be very careful how you go after people's flaws and mistakes. Please, I beg of you. And that's all I will say.
I'll just maybe make one little comment. Inshallah, Allah barak fikum. Allah bless you, akhi Asadullah. Allah fikum for your concern for the scholars of Islam. Allah barak fik. But definitely, I agree with some, and I might have maybe my first little kind of comment that I do not want people to accept me, and respect me if I do something outside the borders of the deen. People should stand up in my face. That's what I teach. Nobody should respect anybody. Even I'm talking about even myself. I tell my students, you shouldn't respect me if I go outside the borders of Islam. Period. And why? Because in Islam we don't have a clergyman. The word clergy and the concept of clergy doesn't exist in Islam. There's no such thing as clergy. We're not inspired by God. We don't have the Holy Ghost come to us. We're not infallible. We are just human beings. We're just human beings. We're just, you go learn engineering for 4 years, we go learn Islam for 4 years, and we get a degree, and bit by bit, basically, maybe we study a little bit more, and we attain just a status of ability to research Islamic theological issues, just like a doctor does and like an engineer does after being well trained in the field. You know what I'm saying? So there's no sanctity for scholars. Maybe this is it was important for me to point it out. Allah barak fik, akhi Asadullah. But definitely agree that the sentiment is the good scholars must be respected. The pious scholars must be respected and loved, definitely. But unfortunately, like what happened to Bani Israel, their scholars basically deviated, and like the scholars of the Nasara, their scholars have deviated, and like some of the scholars of this Ummah, especially today at the end of times, there will be scholars who deviate from the basic building block that are fundamental and are within the perimeter of Islam. They will basically be crossing that, and everybody should be in their face. Now, that being said, like my comment before, which I think Asadullah have resonated with and doubled down on, is that we both of us, we're sick and tired of this bickering, which is within the confines of the legal disagreement within Islam. This is where basically the issue is. So I just wanted to make sure there's no misunderstanding. So let me even re-stress it. Look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran in Surah Al-Imran, هو الذي أنزل عليك الكتاب منه آيات محكمات هن أم الكتاب وأخر متشابهات. He is the one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who revealed upon you the book, that some of its verses are solid. They're non-ambiguous. They have one meaning. They're muhkam. They are the fundamental, the foundations of the book and the deen. And there are other verses that are ambiguous in linguistic structure, not in linguistic structure. Okay? Meaning, basically, the meaning is still clear for those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them the ability to see it. But the structure, linguistic structure, could be understood in multiple ways. And like so, the hadith. And therefore, the ulama, and people are different. Some people are more theoretical and abstract-minded. Some people are more actionable. Some people are more, so Allah created the human beings differently. That's why we are good at different tasks. The one who's good at the fixing engines is not good at the arts. You can't even like hold a brush. And the one who basically can, mashallah, literally take a room and draw it like right there and then, cannot fix a little door. We're built differently. Our brains are wired differently. Our DNA is built differently. And this difference is beauty. This difference is diversity. That's why we can build sophisticated stuff. Everybody builds their specialized piece. So we need to understand and learn. We need to have a culture of learning and respecting and diversity. And loving, appreciating diversity as long as within the legal framework of the deen. We have two problems. I told you there's two problems. There's within the framework, there's people who are bickering and they hate. There's hate and discrimination. Sectarianism is all high. Because you're not like me. Your beard is not like mine. You don't wear my thobe. You don't believe that you need to wipe over the socks in this specific way. People have these little issues, man. Or your aqidah is not like my aqidah. And subhanAllah, they're both Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. But what that brother doesn't understand is that basically there is legal differences within masail that are related to the aqidah within the perimeter of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah in Islam. Oh, he is deviant, he is dal, he is this. Everybody's sick and tired of this, to be honest. Be very frank. And we will basically be opposing them. Wallahi al-Azim, I'm here in public, right? Is this recorded? Me and Asadullah, we stand for this. We will be standing in the face of anybody who is intolerant to the legal differences within Islam. And definitely the second problem, which I talked about earlier, is those who want to cross the line. Those who want to basically enlarge the borders. They want to, fill in this Islam with a little bit of liberalism. We're going to stand up for them too. So there's two problems. We have two problems in the Ummah. May Allah help us to basically bit by bit resolve it. We're here. The reason we took time, me and brother Asad, to come and speak to you is not because we're getting paid. Asad, did you get paid to come here, bro? Alhamdulillah. Did I get paid to be here? No. I've been teaching for alhamdulillah 16 years. Never took a single dime. Alhamdulillah. Not a penny. Alhamdulillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have in I3, every teacher teaches for free. Nobody gets paid to teach Islam. You do it for Allah or just go back home. Get another job, bro. Alhamdulillah, our students, almost all of our students don't pay fees. Yeah. The regular program, that's our largest flagship program, is for free. Alhamdulillah. So this is what I wanted to clarify. Again, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless them. We're on the same side of the story with this whole bickering stuff. Sick and tired of it. If there is legal difference, you have to accept it and see richness, see love, see this difference as something which is like, you appreciate this difference in opinion. It's beautiful. You learn something new. But definitely, basically, we will put a red line when people want to cross the definite and the qat'iyat and the muhkamat and the non-ambiguous fundamentals and foundational aspects. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه فيا فوز المستغفرين. If I said anything that's right, it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His mercy and His blessings. If I said anything that's wrong, it is from me and shaitan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me and guide me to what's right. May Allah bless you guys for coming. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. At least from my side of the story. Barakallahu feekum.
Jazakallah khair.
Sheikh, yeah, I just want to say I agree with those sentiments. Thank you for clarifying for me. Yeah, I agree, and I think that unfortunately, the way of correction today has a proper adab, and not just adab in terms of just etiquette, but in terms of balance, in terms of justice, in terms of how we treat our brothers and sisters, has been completely lost. So I agree with you, Sheikh, that that corrupt scholars and others and those who make mistakes should be called out at all times, even amongst those that we consider to be that we hold to high esteem. However, like I said, these younger individuals, and I think you would concur with me, have gone to such an extreme that they're literally, it's like a witch hunt. It's like, they're just completely trying to destroy everyone around them for even the smallest mistakes or even things they don't even comprehend. And inshallah, I hope that this can be rectified in the future. And I think that, as I said, I think that is also a part of liberalism in that they don't realize their own tradition, and they're unwittingly destroying their own tradition as a result of their behavior. By conflating every single small grievance or small mistake with people they regard as scholar for dollars or whatever they want to call them and things like this. So and a lot of sincere individuals, sincere students of knowledge and scholars who have made simple mistakes or have made mistakes that they were not even aware of or have repented, even apologized, are being completely dragged as though they're the same as somebody who supports a tyrant overseas or something like this, completely like so it's just a profound arrogance. So inshallah, I pray that we can rectify this as well. Thank you for having me on again, and barakallahu feek, and inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and this institute in educating the Muslim youth and Muslims in general here in the West and across the world, inshallah.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair with that. Brother Barbaric for being here with us. Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Usta, for those beautiful words and everything we shared. I hope you guys took a lot of value out of what we shared, and you take this message, you internalize it. If you want to further develop on what it is we're doing, well, I'll leave you with two things. Our next event, inshallah, is most likely going to be on November 5th. You're going to get an email for that, so just be on the lookout. Secondly, specifically on the programs that Sheikh Usta shared, our YD program, we're going to be starting our classes very soon in the next couple of weeks. It's built specifically on this. How do you become a principled Muslim leader? How do you go on to impact societies? How do you carry the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the entire world and do that without fear, do that the way it's supposed to be done? Based on the Sunnah, inshallah. So for that, I've dropped the link in the chat. Feel free to check it out. It's i3institute.ca/register. If for yourself or if anybody in your family, in your circle, let them know, inshallah. Like Sheikh mentioned, everything's absolutely free. We're going to start off with having an orientation, letting you know everything we're going to be covering. On the link, you'll see everything, what the course breakdown is as well. With that said, Jazakumullahu khairan for being here with us today. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from all of us. والله إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
السلام عليكم.